We got more cards for the upcoming trial decks for Dragon Empire and Dark States, and they take the starter decks to the next level. Stand up! Vanguard! Hey Cardfighters, we already saw the initial reveals of the starter deck for Dragon Empire and Dark States, which gave us insight in their main gimmick and their new keyword or main mechanic, what they're gonna revolve around. And the cards that supported that mechanic showcases a really interesting playstyle and already shows us a very explosive potential game plan going forward for either decks. However, with the latest reveals that came in last week, we saw some support cards that changes everything and that turned everything that looked pretty sweet in pretty amazing. So without further ado, let's jump straight into these cards because we got a lot to go over. We got a couple cards for Dark States and a lot for Dragon Empire. And we're going to start off with the Dark States cards, which we got 2 of. Dark States playstyle was already pretty fleshed out with the main core cards, that we got the right deck units as well as the main gimmick and their finishing power. But the main issue that deck had, and I already explained in that previous Cardfight update, is that the deck lacked resources. They can build up soul and they need 5, and they can build up to that 5 soul for the specific turn when they want to unleash it, aka their final rush turn, their 4th turn, and they can make it on time. But with these new support cards, they can be able to do this turn after turn, because the first card that we're going to take a look at is their new order card, which is Brother's Soul. And yeah, the skill says it all. Soul Charge 2. There's nothing really to analyze and to go over further. It's a Soul Charge 2 card, which helps the deck a lot because they need to build up 5 soul every single turn. So having the order cards that gives you 2 soul is pretty nice. Yes, you lose a card in hand because order cards aren't a body onto the board, but losing a card for 2 soul, which helps you to build to your win condition or your main play, is pretty nice. Now there's one more thing that I want to go over with this card, which is pretty interesting, is not only do the new order cards look pretty damn amazing, this new way how they frame it looks way better than the original order cards that we got last year. But not only that, this basically confirms, and we already had an inclination that this was going to be the case with the fact that every starter deck has its own order card, that order cards are going to be nation bound. So we might see vanilla generic order cards like in the past, but it's also very likely that order cards from this point onwards are going to mainly be nation specific. So I'm very curious how this is going to pan out, and we're going to see for the future. I'm very confident that the trial decks order cards are going to be nation specific, but maybe we get generic order cards in the sets themselves. But that's something we have to see in the future itself. Now, this Soul Charge card is pretty nice, but it isn't the only one they got access to, because they also got a new grade 1. Which is Acrobat Presenter. And this is the Pale Moon card from the set or from the trial deck, and it has the ability on Vanguard Circle. When this unit attacks or boosts, if your Vanguard is Diabolus, Violence, Bruce, aka the Grade 3, Soul Charge 1. And if you are in Final Rush, Soul Charge 1. Now this is incredibly good, because unlike the order card, this doesn't cost you anything to generate the resources. But interesting enough, this fixes an issue with the deck itself, because the deck solely revolves around the final rush turn, aka the 4th turn. But to build up the 5 soul, you need to specifically persona right to get that 5th soul on the turn that you want to use the Soul Blast 5 skill. Now, with the Brother's Soul order card, you could get that 5th soul, but also the 6th soul, but you get 1 soul over that you might not need to use. Now, with Acrobat Presenter, being able to just Soul Charge on boost, and it doesn't matter if you're in Final Rush or not, means that you can build up that 5th soul a turn earlier if you cannot persona right. If you do not have that copy of Violence Bruce in your hand to even perform that persona right. So this grade 1 Acrobat Presenter can fix that issue and generate that 5th soul. Now, if we go on the topic of generating excess soul, like with the order card and this grade 1 that can generate 2 soul per turn, then we get in a scenario where we can easily use the Final Rush Soul Blast 5 skill of Violence Bruce turn after turn after turn, because the order card gives us 2 soul. This grade 1 can generate 2 soul, which is already 4 soul, and if we can persona right that turn again, That's again the 5th soul. So we can see already how easy it is to build up the soul that we need turn after turn for the 5 soul less cost of Violence Bruise. Because the first 5 soul can be generated with the right chain of the right deck, aka the grade 1 and the grade 2, and then with Persona Riding Violence Bruise. And the next 5 soul can be generated with one order card, one of this grade 1 that gains 2 soul, and then another Persona Ride. And if you cannot Persona Ride again, well, if you have that Acrobat Percenter one extra turn on the field, you're already done with generating the soul that you need. So overall, this support lineup for the Spike Brothers, aka the Dark States starter deck, looks pretty good. They are pretty consistent now. The only issue that they have, as I can see right now, is that their early game is pretty bad. They aren't a rush deck. They're mainly around the final turn, which is ironic because their main mechanic, their gimmick is called Final Rush, yet they don't rush in the early game. But you know which deck does rush in the early game? That's right, Dragon Empire. Because the new reveals that we got for Dragon Empire shows us or tells us that that deck really wants to hammer down the early aggression right from the first couple of turns in the game and then end it up on your Persona Ride turn with your Dragon Empire, grade 3 or whatever you're gonna use. And the reason why I can say that is because we got a lot of new reveals for the trial deck for Dragon Empire. And let's go over them, and then you can see for yourself what I mean. And the first that we're gonna talk about is their new PG, which is Escort Stealth Dragon Hayashi Kaze. Now, this is just a generic Sentinel. However, there is one interesting little change that they made to this Perfect Guard that might absolutely mean nothing, or can mean everything. Because in its skill tags, we see auto when this unit is put into the Guardian Circle. In the past, they specifically state place. And we can see that in new skills even now with the right deck cards in the Spike Brothers or this Dark States trial deck. They say when this unit is placed on the Vanguard Circle, still the word placed is used. So I'm curious why they decide to use the word put in this particular instance. Now, I'm not sure if this means that if we could intercept with this card, we can still use this effect. I'm not that sure about how that ruling specifically works. I still go with the standard that you still need to place it onto the Guardian Circle like you usually would. But if this word change from place to put does allow us to still use the Perfect Guards if we can intercept with them, then that opens up a very interesting possibility with certain nations in premium, as they can give your units intercepts. So if we could give our Perfect Guard intercepts, that might be very interesting, because that's something that the Gurgwit PG during the G era should have gotten in the first place. But that's nothing here nor there. Now, if we go further with the cards, we got another very peculiar card, because we got this grade 1 vanilla card, Iron Ball Dragon and Key Bowler. But the weird part is, it's a vanilla that doesn't have any redeeming factors. It has 5k shield, 8k power, 1 critical, and boost. That's exactly the same as all the other grade 1s that have skills. So I am very baffled about why this is a vanilla that doesn't have higher base power, more shield value, maybe an inherent double critical, or the interceptability that we've seen in the V era. Even the very first vanillas ever were always something with at least higher numbers printed on the card itself. So I'm curious why they went with this approach, and if it's going to be that vanillas actually are going to be vanillas with no redeeming quality, or it's Dragon Empire. Maybe this card will get a future overdress evolution. That's something we don't know for now, but it might be the case. But for as we see right now, it looks to be that vanilla cards are actually just what they are, vanilla cards, and that's it. So I hope this isn't going to be the change for vanilla cards. I hope there's still going to be higher values on actual vanilla cards like we've seen all those years before. Now, a card that isn't vanilla but almost could have been a vanilla card is the supporting grade 3, which really showcases us that yes, even though the main cards of the trial deck or starter deck are going to be insanely powerful, it doesn't have to be for every card in the starter deck, because we have typical starter deck cards in this package. Because the supporting grade 3 is Fire/Dragon Inferno Sword, and its ability is continues a Vanguard Circle. During the battle this unit attacked, this unit gets power plus 2k. It's a 15k attacker for a grade 3. It's pretty bad. You cannot deny it, it's pretty bad. Yes, it can make 23k columns with an 8k booster, maybe the 8k vanilla that we just talked about, but that doesn't mean it's good. Interesting enough, it does have the Persona Ride icon, which is weird, as you're never gonna place it in your right deck, meaning you need to write it from hand and then write it again from hand to activate the Persona Ride, which I think nobody is ever gonna do, because Chakravarti is that much better for obvious reasons. But again, it's a supporting card for the starter deck, so I'm fine with this. Now, let's get into the actual main topic of this video, which is also where the title and the thumbnail of this video comes from. Because let's talk about the right deck cards for Dragon Empire, because they have been revealed and they change everything. As for this Dark States one, we saw the Violence Brew supporting cast that allowed you to build up your soul to ramp up to your main game plan, and those two cards inherently worked as rearguard beaters that gain power, thus enabling you to gain more value of your restand shenanigans during your final rush turn. Now, this is somewhat similar with Dragon Empire, but they take a different approach. Because here we have Blaze Maiden Reno, the Grade 1 right deck target. And her abilities are auto when this unit is rode upon by Blaze Maiden Ryu, the Grade 2, search your deck for up to one Trickstar, call to the rearguard circle, and shuffle your deck. And her second ability is continuous Vanguard to rearguard circle. During the battle this unit attacked, this unit gets power plus 2k. So it's a 10k attacker on Vanguard or rearguard, but more importantly, it's a Trickstar searcher. Now, if we go back to the Cardfight update where I talked about and analyzed the new card that was Trickstar and Varina and Chakravarti, I talked about the fact that the combo where you have those Trickstars or those evolution Trickstars in Varina on the rearguard circle with Chakravarti, where you could have potentially 40k beaters, is insanely strong, but that combo itself is not consistent because it's a free card combo, as you need Chakravarti, you need Trickstar, and you need Varina. Now, Chakravarti, you don't need to get it into your hand because you can have the right deck ready for you. So you only need Trickstar and Varina. Now, of course, Chakravarti had the skill that you could get a Trickstar from the drop zone back onto the field, but it doesn't change the fact that you still need to draw into the first copy of Trickstar in the first place. Now, that whole aspect of that argument why the combo play is not as strong because it's somewhat inconsistent is lowered because Trickstar has an inherent searcher thanks to this Grade 1. So the only thing that you miss is Varina, and we're going to get to that in a moment. Which basically means you always have a Trickstar onto the board. So you can call Trickstar on turn 2 because you write into your Grade 2 turn. You can write it, you can call to the rearguard circle. If you have the Varina in hand, you can immediately overdress it and immediately attack with a 20k beater, so you can be a bit more aggressive in the early game. Granted, if that unit gets retired or removed from the field, you can get the Trickstar back onto the board once you write into Chakravarti, but you also lost your Varina copy, so you need to get the Varina in your hand to then overdress it once you can give it another 10k power buff with your Chakravarti turn. Which means it's kind of risky if you don't have that extra copy of your Varina in hand. So you need 2 copies in hand to do that play. Or to even say that you can potentially commit to the board on your Grade 2 turn. But again, we get to that because that changes again once we take a look at the Grade 2 herself. But interesting enough, this Grade 1 is the opposite of the Grade 1 right chain of the Dark States one, because the Dark States card is something you want to write on the Vanguard circle, but it's also rearguards that you want, so you're obviously going to play 4 copies. But in Reno's case, it's very likely that you're only going to run 1 copy, and it's a copy in your right deck, because she as a rearguard unit doesn't mean anything for you, because a 10k attacker is kind of underwhelming. It's not really great. So you're probably only going to use her for her Vanguard when she's rode upon skill to just search out your Trickstar. And this is going to be the same case for the Grade 2. So let's take a look at the Grade 2, because the Grade 2 changes everything completely, and it showcases why the new Dragon Empire deck is going to be heavy aggro from right out of the gate. Because the new Grade 2 is Blaze Maiden Ryu. And Ryu has the same continuous ability that she gains plus 2k power when she's attacked, so same as what we've seen with Reno, probably not going to be played as a rearguard unit, so it's going to be a one-off in your right deck and that's it, because of her first ability. because her ability is auto. When this unit is rode upon by Chakravarti, Divine Dragon, Nirvana, cost Soul Blast 1. Search your deck for up to 1 Varina, reveal it, and put it into your hand and shuffle your deck. So if we write her on top of the grade 1, Reino, we get Trickster to her hand. And then if we write Chakravarti on top of her, we get Varina into her hand. So that basically completes the whole play of overdressing it and then using Chakravarti's Counterblast skill to give another 10k buff and have a 30k beater onto the board. So this means you can do that play 100% of the time. Which is insane, because that means the play that I just talked about, having a Trickstar on turn 2 and then write a Varina from her hand or overdress it onto the board from her hand on turn 2 to have a 20k beater on turn 2 is now optional. Because that means the only thing you need in the early game is 1 Varina in hand, and because you don't need to mulligan for right consistency, you can just mulligan your entire hand to get into that Varina, which allows you to beat with a 20k beater onto the board in the early game. And then even if they retire it or remove the card, the moment you write Chakravarti, you can use its skill to discard a card, resurrect the Trickstar, and you got the other Varina from your deck into your hand thanks to reuse ability, so you can overdress again. But in the case that your opponent didn't remove your Varina and it's still on the board, you can actually gain 2 Varinas on the board thanks to this ability, because it is a Soul Blast. And who didn't say you can use Trickstar as your grade 0? If you have Trickstar as your starter, you can Soul Blast the Trickstar with this ability, get it into the drop zone, then use Chakravarti to resurrect it onto the board, and then immediately overdress it with the other Varina copy you got thanks to this skill, and suddenly you have 2 Varinas in overdress state onto your front row, while Chakravarti is your main Vanguard. And then you can Counterblast 1 to give everything 10k power. That's actually pretty reasonable and relatively consistent, because the only thing you need to do that play is to run Trickster as your starter, have Reno as your grade 1 right target, have Rayu as your grade 2 right target, and Chakravarti as your grade 3 right target, which is 100% going to happen. And then you only need to get a Varina in the top 10 cards from your deck once you start the game. And actually a bit more, because you mulligan your entire hand, so there's 10 cards, and then you're gonna draw a couple of cards. So that's very likely. So yeah, Dragon Empire is going to be a very high aggro play. Now, the only thing that I find interesting here, and I already touched upon this a little bit, is that Reiju and Reno aren't going to be 4-offs in your deck. There's no way that you're going to play them in your main deck outside of the right deck, because there's no upset to them as 10k attackers, or in Reno's case a 12k attacker. That doesn't really do anything, especially since you can have 20k attackers that can even be stronger thanks to the whole synergy that happens here. But that's about everything that I want to go over and talk about, because this video is going on long enough. Yeah, granted, there were a lot of cards to talk about, because I didn't really make any videos the last couple of days, because I didn't really wanted to make a video for a PG or a vanilla or only the grade 1 or only the grade 2. I want to have more things to talk about and have a bigger picture, to be able to make a bigger picture here. And that's basically the story of this video in general. Well, with it said, this video has been brought to you by lovely patrons over at patreon.com/VanguardInsider. You guys are amazing. If you do want to support the channel or everything that's happening on the channel, you can simply go to patreon.com/VanguardInsider and become a patron today. But with that said, I'm Mr. Time Leaps, and I see you guys in the next one!